people were saying in the comments, she has to have high-level observation hockey, because the way she be predicting stuff. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. I was just reading my favorite book. Speaking of books, girl, if you didn't know, fun fact about me, I actually wrote a book whenever I was younger, when I was like 14. And recently, I've kind of been rewriting it, not really. Girl, I like to do too many things. And there's not enough time in the day, so that's why I say kind of, because not really. Despite all of that, I don't even really like reading. Quite strange. I like writing a lot, but I don't really like reading. I've actually thought about reading politics books because I thought that would be a way for me to get into reading, since that's one of my hyperfixations. But like, girl, that's besides the point. Because girl, I will read a scholarly article real quick. I'll read New York Times, Washington Post, girl, I'll read it real quick. But I'm talking about books for a very particular reason. I'm not just like rambling for no reason. With Hassan's old trash taste appearance resurfacing, and the One Piece's political narrative popping off online, finally, girl! One Piece has spread its tentacles into the most unlikely spaces. One of these spaces being Booktok, which has recently started reading the manga. Now, when trying to find out why One Piece became so popular on Booktok, I stumbled across Straw Hat Katie, a creator on TikTok who used to be a booktalker until she fell in love with One Piece. She said the dimensional characters, story, politics are the main draws for avid readers.
A lot of people recently have also been talking about how like One Piece is or isn't political. And I do believe that One Piece is political. I do believe that Oda is doing that intentionally. And I think that aspect of it also really resonates with people who read a lot. Especially with the current political climate, it is very refreshing for me to see these characters who are like me succeeding against the forces trying to hold them down. So all of these things put together, I think make it so that One Piece does them in a way that really, really just hits hard for bookish people.
Especially with the amount of mythology and references to other literatures throughout the manga, like Don Quixote, Dante's Inferno, even Japanese mythology, like with Fishman Island and Otohime-sama, and even the Bible itself. It's no wonder that Booktok is obsessed with the series. If anything, it was kind of made for them. Now, obviously, over the past 2 years, if you are familiar with my commentary, I've been making One Piece's political videos for a while now. It's an entire series, an entire playlist, which you can go watch right now. If you like anime, like One Piece, I've got, what is it, like 13 videos at this point? That seems like too many, but I've got a lot of videos pretty much covering every single arc and its politics. But throughout my time of doing that, I've seen a lot of comments saying One Piece is not that deep. Okay, you're reading too much into it. What the hell are you even talking about? There are dragons that lord over the 7 seas. Girl, what are you even talking about? So I wanted to put it to the test to see who is right. Am I reading too much into this fun pirate anime? Or are regular people just lacking media literacy skills? What happens when you take normal people who are experts at media literacy because they read arguably way too much, but have never read One Piece? Will they see everything I see, or will they side with my ops in the One Piece community? That's what we'll be putting to the test today. But before we get into any of that, I've gotta let you know, I gotta do a little bit of a PSA. I've gotta ask you to subscribe. If you like the premise of this video, you like uncovering and politically analyzing your hyperfixations like anime, gaming, other media, things of that nature, then this is the channel for you. So girl, maybe you need a little bit more time. Okay, I'll give you a little bit more time, but I'm just letting you know the subscribe button is down there whenever you are ready. It'll welcome you with a warm embrace whenever you're ready. I also have Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, Discord. You can connect with your fellow community members. You can get exclusive content. On Patreon, my highest tier can actually see the full video, this video, actually. One's just like this before anyone else can. So if you're into early access, exclusive content, you want to see the process, that's a great place to do it. So I found 3 Booktokers. So far it seems like the Booktokers aren't like super far into the One Piece manga. The farthest I have seen someone cover is Skypeia arc. There might be some people who are farther, but that's as far as I've seen. I found 3 Booktokers that have covered the 3 first main arcs, I would say, Arlong Park, Alabasta, and Skypeia. And I want to see, like I said, do they see what I see? What is their analysis after reading this manga for the first time blind? So the first person I found was Morganreadss on TikTok, and I watched her Arlong Park review, and I want to see what she thinks. Arlong Park is one of my favorite arcs. I forget where I ranked it, but it's a pretty exceptional arc. I don't know if I ranked it S, but honestly it should be. Should it? I don't know. I think it's like a low S, like it's a pretty exceptional arc, so I'm excited to see what she thinks.
Arlong Park wasn't the turner of the tides for me, but I am continuing my One Piece journey, and let me tell you why. Last we spoke, I wrapped up volume 3, and I was enjoying it, but I didn't really understand the hype. I'm happy to report that I get it now. I do. And when it comes to Arlong Park, I understand why so many people say that this is where they started getting hooked.
I went into expecting a super emotional moment because of the hype, which kind of, from the way she described it, ruined her experience, or it just set her expectations too high for this arc. As you know, I spoiled One Piece, which I've talked about a lot throughout my journey of watching One Piece. I would watch like Crunchyroll clips of the anime in general, but they were out of context, so it would like spoil it for me because I would know like, oh, this is coming up, but I didn't really know what was in between that, which I think is actually the perfect way to spoil, if you're gonna spoil. Although I can totally relate to like arcs being hyped up, or like you know that they're super popular, and then whenever you experience them you're like, it didn't connect with me. Like that's how I felt with Marineford, like because I'm pretty sure one of the most popular arcs in One Piece, but it was really good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like Skypeia level. It wasn't like Water 7 in this lobby, you know what I mean? So I think I can definitely relate to that. Like people love Dressrosa. Girl, I still don't understand why people like that arc, but you know, to each their own. We're all special in our own unique little way. You can have your opinion. It doesn't mean it's right, but like you can have it. I'm not gonna shit on you for it, you know what I mean? But I do think it's important to experience One Piece in whatever way is best for you. So if that's, you know, spoiling and watching anime clips like me that are out of context, or One Piece, although in my experience I didn't feel that One Piece was necessary except for like Dressrosa and Zoe, because it gets a little boring. Maybe Fishman Island, because people for some reason don't like the pacing of Fishman Island. Like post time skip I could totally see One Piece. For me, honestly, maybe it's just because I was locked in from the beginning, so you know, people think that the beginning of One Piece is really boring. I think like I said, I was locked the frick in. Like I was there and I was seated, because you get politics from the start. Like there's something to eat at the very start, so I don't understand that, but girl, to each their own. Or you could strictly read the manga. Like whatever way you experience One Piece, as long as you love it, as long as you're spreading the gospel of One Piece, we don't need any more haters, you know? Then that's all that matters to me personally.
What really stuck with me and made me hopeful about the future of One Piece are the politics. We got some crumbs of politics, but if you know me, that is one of my favorite parts of books besides the character development, and I understand that One Piece gets very political.
I'm not sure how she would politically analyze this arc, but obviously I dubbed Arlong Park an apartheid state. I think that's pretty obvious whenever you're looking at it from a political lens. I would actually say, if we're talking about the crumbs of politics within One Piece, I would actually say that becomes before Arlong Park, with Romance Dawn showing the Navy isn't operating for justice. You know, everything isn't all as it seems, especially, you know, we get introduced to Kobe, who really wants to become a Marine, and he wants to get into it because he's been told his whole life this is an institution that fights for justice and order. But then we see Axehand Morgan, who is a very corrupt individual. His son is a literal nepo baby who will eventually is supposed to precede him. It becomes very clear that like not everything's as it seems, and the Marines might be our enemy or our ops in some way. And even like Orangetown, I would say, with like Buggy trying to take over this island is like a sprinkle of colonization, which becomes obviously a very huge staple for Oda. Oda loves talking about colonization, which obviously with pirates it works perfectly, but there are a lot of arcs that is like the main focus. So I feel like Orangetown is like the predecessor to that. But Arlong Park is the first time you're like, yeah, this is for sure political. Like, there's no going back. There's no way to read between the lines. It just is. So I wouldn't even really say it's a crumb, but Arlong is literally an authoritarian leader who subjugates the people in the Kokoyashi village because of their race, which he has deemed inferior. Which obviously you could connect that to racism, you could connect it to South Africa, to Israel, just that ideology. Although I will say future arcs like Fishman Island, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but future arcs kind of muddy the waters of that political analysis. It kind of muddies the waters of those comparisons.
But what actually made me cry wasn't a flashback itself, and it didn't happen in Arlong Park. It was in Baradier, when Zoro is losing to Hawkeyes, and he realizes that he's got a long way to go before he becomes the greatest swordsman. And then he remembers the promise that he made to his friend, and he remembers this mid-fight. And then Hawkeye says to him, "Why don't you give up? Like, you know you're gonna lose. Why are you still trying so hard?" That one hurt. A few other scenes that hit different were the ending of the Syrup Village arc. Having that arc end with Usopp the liar continuing to be a liar by not telling the villagers about what happened because it would keep their peace of mind. That was just a really impactful realization. Also in Baradier, when Sanji says, "My job is to feed people, not to judge," that's a line that hit hard.
The first saga is definitely focused on building relationships and establishing characters through flashbacks and emotional scenes. I'm so glad I finally found someone who appreciates Syrup Village, because I think that arc is so underrated, so slept on. Usopp as a character, let me tell you, Usopp as a character is slept on. That arc still sticks with me because it's such a great example of showing, not telling, which I think is one of the things that Oda does best. I mean, he's already an exceptional writer, which he proves through his characters and through his environment and his complex plots and all of that, but you learn about Usopp's motivations and his character. You get introduced to him as a character purely through his environment, and there's not like an explicit statement too much. I mean, obviously the townspeople are like, "Oh, he's just lying again," but I'm saying like you learn why he's a liar purely through his environment and the events that you encounter, and it becomes very clear that he's a liar to protect himself because he's been without his dad. He's had to basically lie to himself that his dad is coming back. Like, girl, I honestly, he's an exceptional black character, because I think a lot of black people could see, maybe that's why I love Usopp. I think a lot of black people could see themselves in Usopp. Like, he's great black representation, and he also just has so much depth that people sleep on, girl. And Usopp, like she said, continuing to lie until the very end makes his imperfections something you can appreciate and understand. And it also starts to tie in like this thing that Oda constantly does with his characters, where even his main characters are not like heroes. They're not like, a lot of times in, you know, shows like this or franchises like this, they'll present their main characters as like perfect or, you know, perfect idols. But in One Piece, that's not a thing. Like, Usopp being a liar isn't even necessarily a negative thing. It is just morally ambiguous, which is a theme throughout One Piece. Like I said, he does it to protect himself, so there's a bit of like validity in it. He does it to protect others. He protects the townspeople at the very end. It's not necessarily like a black and white thing, which, like I said, is a huge theme, and I think a very successful thing that Oda does throughout One Piece. Now, Cheddars on TikTok covered Alabasta. Cheddars doesn't really get too much into the analysis of, like, the literary analysis of Arlabasta or the political analysis, but more so talks about things that stood out to her.
It is one of the most beautifully written stories that I have ever read, and I'm not being dramatic. It genuinely was such a wonderful and phenomenal reading experience. So they finally find out that the bomb is in the clock tower. So they do this crazy jumping sequence to get up there. and Vivi is able to cut the fuse, and you're like, oh, okay, everybody's safe. No, it's on a timer. And so you're like, oh great, like how are we gonna get past this? Oh my word. And then Pell comes up and takes the bomb and flies it, and before he does, he says that serving Vivi's family has been the greatest honor of his life. I was so upset. It was so sad. Oh my word, I was not expecting it, and he flew up and the bomb went off, taking him with it, but it saved the kingdom. I literally feel like I'm gonna get emotional talking about it.
I love the fight scenes, and I was surprised that she got emotional during Pell's sacrifice, because I would expect that to be like someone who reads a lot to not be like super happy with the way that Oda handled that, if that makes sense. Because that was something in the earlier arcs that I wasn't too fond of, because Oda would do a lot of fake out deaths, and it lowered the stakes of the arcs because you knew that the characters were just gonna live. But with Vivi and Vivi's father and Pell and everyone in the kingdom, there's this theme throughout Alabasta of like sacrifice. I think it would have been so much more impactful if Pell died for his country, because Vivi, this entire saga, is doing everything in her power to save her kingdom and save the place that she grew up and loves. And so I just think it would have tied in better with that if Pell had actually died. Because when I saw him in his crutches and I looked up to see if he dies in the manga or if he lives, like I didn't know if that was something that the anime changed, but he lives in the manga as well. Whenever I saw him in the crutches, I was like so mad, because I was like, girl, Oda, why?
Felt so intensely for Vivi, because she so desperately didn't want to lose anybody in this battle, and she's had to face so much violence and fighting, and she's had to mature a lot and see the really bad parts of her world and her kingdom in such a short amount of time.
I did like Vivi, which, if you've heard my commentary on Arlong, not the biggest fan of her. I just thought she was annoying. But her, I completely understand liking her. I understand why other people like her, because like I said, she is fighting for her kingdom and to save the place she loves, you know. So I mean, I understand as a character. I'm actually sure that in the manga, when you're I feel like when you're reading, you can have a bit more interpretation about the characters than you can with an anime, because with an anime it's like what you see is what you get. I'm sure it's slightly different, is my point, reading Vivi than it is like watching Vivi.
And what happens? No one's stopping fighting, but it starts to rain and everybody stops because they just wanted water. They're desperate people. And the rain came and just, oh my gosh, everything was revealed. The people were mortified that they had been tricked into this grand scheme, and it was just a really beautifully written ending. And the fact that Luffy and the pirates didn't want any recognition for this. Luffy, when the king thanked him for saving him, and his like smiling face, and he's like, it's no big deal, like it was no problem.
That was definitely the most impactful moment of the arc, was the theme surrounding resource deprivation, which I covered in my Alabasta arc and linked back to Palestine, which you can even link to like Flint, Michigan, just literally anywhere where there has been resources intentionally deprived by the government or by some sort of colonial force. I just watched the Chainsaw movie. As of filming this, I watched it yesterday. Freaking, first of all, let me say, probably one of the best. I don't know if it's the best, because I love A Silent Voice, as you know. That's my favorite anime movie, or animated movie in general. Reze Arc has to be probably one of the best animated movies to ever exist. Girl, every moment was intentional, every moment, like, girl, the hype on Twitter was worth it. That's all I'm saying. But Chainsaw Man as a manga, which is my point, kind of points back to a similar type of thing with the character Denji. He was in debt when he was younger. He had to take on his father's debt, and he, you know, was starving, and was scrounging for money. He had to sleep in like a shed basically, and so whenever he finally works for public safety as a devil hunter, he is just happy that he gets to live the most basic life. He doesn't want anything like, he doesn't want to be the best, he just wants to survive, which I think we in the Western world for the most part can't relate to. Obviously there are, what they're like, was it 600,000 homeless people in the United States? Or something along those lines. There's a lot of homeless people within the United States, so obviously some people in the Western world can relate to that. But for the most part, we take advantage of the pillaging and the imperialism that this nation has done to the global South, and we take things like basic resources for granted. So we don't realize like how impactful it is to have a roof over your head, to have water, you know, good drinkable water. And water is a resource that affects food production and hydration and the overall climate. Like, it is obviously it's an insanely important resource to have. I think highlighting deprivation of resources is like a simple concept, but so meaningful in nature. Very powerful story. So I completely understand why she said it was the most beautifully written arc, or one of the most beautifully written things she's ever read. So I can completely understand how she would think that. I also need, last but not least, to talk about Julietteslibraryy, because she, from my understanding, has predicted so many parts of One Piece simply by just, this is crazy, what I'm about to say is crazy, but just by reading it. I think if we're gonna have a conversation around media literacy and its importance, I have to mention her, because she must be the go at it. People were saying in the comments she has to have high level observation hockey, because the way she be predicting stuff that we didn't even pick up on ourselves, which someone in the comments said we don't probably pick up on a lot of stuff, well, mostly because anime fans are no shade, not the best at obviously media literacy and stuff. But also there's anime logic. So sometimes when stuff happens and we don't like fully understand it, we're like, you know, it'll make sense later. And so we're not even like trying to think like 10 steps ahead. But Juliet, girl, she was eating. People have literally accused her of lying and reading spoilers because she can read the series and pick up on Oda's foreshadowing. Like, just because you guys have never read anything in your life and you like to get spoon-fed information on Twitter doesn't mean that everyone else does that. Now, she is the farthest of any of the Booktok girlies I've seen. She's in Skypeia, and her analysis eats down. She brought up a really good point that I didn't even think about, because Skypeia for me is definitely an S tier arc. It's one of my top 3 favorite arcs. It's exceptional. But at the end of the arc, both the Shandorians and Skypeians chose the Sky Knight to lead their new nation.
I think this is my favorite arc so far in the entirety of One Piece, and even though I disagreed with most of its political elements, political themes that he showed us and ended them, I did not agree with. He took the very easy way out. When everything ended and Enero was defeated, the Sky People and the Shandorians came together, called it an end to the war, and decided to live in harmony. And their leader, both groups of people chose the Sky Knight to lead them. Looking at it from an outsider's perspective, that's so weird. It's like having the first thing that comes to my mind is, imagine the genocide in Palestine was put to a stop by Israel, and they decide to live in harmony now. But an Israeli is going to lead both nations. No, but pick a new one, bro. There's so many people, you can't pick a new one?
Like, she is so right. That would be like if Palestine and Israel decide to do a one-state solution, which inshallah will happen. Instead of choosing a new leader, chose Bibi Netanyahu to be their leader. Like, fuck no. Like, Gonfall is someone who has in the past denied the Shandorians their right to return to their land, even though in One Piece he's like presented as this complex character who means well and has, you know, learned from his past mistakes or whatever. Like, he was still the perpetuator of an entire ethnic cleansing campaign. So, like, he ain't that innocent. I don't know. Like, that's a little weird. But she still said it was her favorite arc so far, which obviously, like I said, is my experience as well. The pacing, at least in the anime, I don't know how it is in the manga, but it was a bit slow and kind of dragged in the middle of the arc. But the politics and the connection to Palestine allowed me to connect with it on a deeper level that I don't think I would have had I read it before October 7th. Like, I actually think that the timing at which I watched One Piece was kismet. Like, I think it was ordained. Because I got to read it right after October 7th, like, it was literally a few months afterwards. And I was watching a literal genocide unfold in front of my eyes. It allowed me to have this fresh perspective and to connect with Arlong Park and Alabasta and Skypeia deeper. Because I could literally see it unfolding in front of me. Obviously, being black also helped that perspective because black history has a few similarities to the Palestinian people. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are different, but there are a lot of things that are the same. Like, we both have emancipation movements. You know, we both, the American state, like with the Jim Crow South, was literally an apartheid state. We don't really call it that here. We just call it segregation, but it's literally an apartheid state. So what they are going through with the civil liberty side of like equal rights and equal representation, obviously very similar to like black people in the civil rights era, not even just in America, but in South Africa, and I'm sure in places like Europe, like England and all of that, had to go through a similar thing. A lot of people, from my understanding, aren't crazy about Skypeia. And I think it's because they don't realize how impactful it is. And they, of course, like I said, whenever you consume it for something like, you know, what's going on in Palestine, it's probably harder to connect with. Like, a lot of people in the West can't relate to ethnic cleansing and genocide because we are living in the aftermath of one that occurred, like 400 years ago. But in the same way that being black helped me connect instantly after October 7th to the Palestinian people, that perspective in watching a genocide unfold in real time allowed me to see how profound Skypeia was. My mind was literally blown whenever she predicted Robin's backstory.
Robin can read them. Why can't she read the poneglyphs? Okay, we know that she has a special interest in archaeology, in cadavers and whatnot. Robin was 8 years old when she had the first bounty put on her head for sinking 6 or 8 marine ships. The government here are the enemies. They're the actual evil entity in the whole One Piece universe. So she probably didn't actually do that. Or even if she did, she had good reasons to do that. Why can she read the poneglyphs? Coming to Eneru's devil fruit. This man can control an element in nature. Do you know what that means? There is an individual that can have such strong power to take control of an element of nature. That means that somebody else can control water, somebody else can control earth, like, you know, the earth's structure, somebody can control the weather, etc., etc. So that means that somebody very powerful can get rid of existing civilizations like this. Which brings me to think, somebody could intentionally make Jaya split in half. Somebody could intentionally make knock-up streams. Somebody could intentionally get rid of 100 years of history by erasing maybe like a group of people that are like their job is to keep history records. Like I said, the Library of Alexandria.
Like, she literally has to have observation hockey, because what in the hell? For a second, I was kind of like, you know, I can see why people think that she read like a spoiler for him or something. But when you think about it, it does make sense. Like, when you look at it, even through just the lens of what the information that you have in Skypeia, Robin is on the run from the world government. She can read this ancient text of phonoglyphs. Perhaps there's something, like, if we're to connect the two, perhaps there's something she's not supposed to know. Especially now that at this point, we very obviously know the world government isn't like a good entity. So it does make sense, and I could totally see how she got to that conclusion. And she wasn't like completely right in her prediction, but it was like, what in the hell, girl? Because when I watched Skypeia, I didn't even think about that. Like, I didn't even think how this would connect to Enies Lobby. So, especially after Juliett's analysis, I think I can conclude that some of y'all need to pick up a book, read an article, something. I mean, people are so far removed from the concept of media literacy that they were accusing her of lying about how much she knew about the series. I think that in itself proves that we might be in a dire state. I think I mentioned a bit in my AI Studio Ghibli video that things like AI will only make that situation worse, but I'm sure also the lack of good education and social media has already exacerbated that predicament. I was lucky enough to go to a school where we did like research papers every year, and people hated it, but I loved it. And now I'm doing research papers like every week. It's pretty awesome. Obviously not everyone went to a school like that, so media literacy is just not something that's taught within schooling, and it's obviously not just an American problem. It is a worldwide thing at this point. See, so often people get duped by believing certain narratives on Twitter or TikTok because they just listen to people that they trust. They just listen to their favorite creator and never stop to think, you know, maybe I should look into this myself. Maybe I should see if this person is telling the truth. Like, they may not even be doing it maliciously, but maybe I should just check the information so I know the truth. You know, people never stop to do that, and that only isolates us further because we start to burn bridges across communities on the internet. We write off people or media, and we don't absorb other perspectives or engage with nuance. The internet has this very black and white way of thinking, and I think One Piece is a great example that a lot of things within our world have nuance and need nuance. The characters have nuance, the story has immense foreshadowing and is baked with politics. Hell, even Eiichiro Oda himself is a media literacy test. Oda doesn't always portray women or queer people in the best light or the way other people would choose to if they are from those communities, but he's very obviously progressive in his thinking. Like, there's no second guessing that. Like, after Wano and Egghead, I feel pretty assured in saying that he's gotta be a communist for sure. And we already know he has a Che Guevara picture in his office, which Japanese people, just from my understanding, love Che Guevara. But this seems to go a little further than just a little love for Che Guevara because he visited Japan or whatever. There's nuance in how he portrays the cops, and not in like a back the blue type of way, but just because that's just how it is in the real world. His main characters aren't necessarily heroes. They have flaws, like I said. The plot of the arcs is complex and dynamic. If we are to circle back to Skypeia, I truly believe the lack of media literacy and political literacy is why people don't like this arc. I would even go as far as to say Wano is slept on for that very same reason. And as I said, this is why taking the time to understand different perspectives, to read about historical events, broadens your view of the world and media so much. Because you can look at these arcs in One Piece and fully understand them. I mean, I think a lot of people disregard the politics of One Piece because they just don't want to look at it and they want to just consume it as something fun. But I think it's getting harder and harder to do that because not even just America, but parts of Europe are devolving into fascism, and into the clutches of right-wing framing on immigration and just extremism. It's getting harder and harder to ignore that, which is why you're seeing One Piece being used in protest so much, which obviously proves that some One Piece fans do understand the politics of it. But like I said, I think it's getting harder and harder for those fans that still want to ignore it to do that, because everybody else sees it and that island that they're on is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I mean, the youth of Nepal literally did as Luffy would do and kick their former prime minister out of the country. That's actually why seeing it in Mexico and how it's being misused in the Mexico protest is infuriating, because they're weaponizing the lack of media literacy to present their movement as legitimate, when in reality it's closer to what we would call a color revolution and is organized by conservatives and media oligarchs, from my understanding. But people online will not read into what's going on with the Mexican protests. They will just think it's another Nepal-like protest where Gen Z is fighting back against corruption. And also the issue is that even whenever you do look into something like the Mexican protest, you still have to dig through several perspectives, because the mainstream media is gonna like something like conservatives trying to co-opt some sort of revolutionary framing, because American media doesn't like leftists famously. So even though they do collaborate with Claudia Sheinbaum's administration, they still don't want people to think that leftism is a good thing. So they also like that conservatives are doing what they're doing with these Mexican protests. So even if you look into it, it still requires a good deal of media literacy to comb through the mess. But in conclusion, after all, it seems like I'm right, and One Piece really is that deep. If you want to dive into One Piece like the Booktok girlies just did, I of course would recommend it. I truly believe, if nothing else, if I have no other purpose in this world, my purpose is to spread Eiichiro Oda's gospel through One Piece and tell you about how amazing it is, and that is the best thing possibly to ever be created. And you guys may think I'm joking, but I'm really not. If you do decide to go on a One Piece journey, I have videos covering the politics of pretty much every single arc, my interpretations, my theories. In the last video on Whole Cake Island, I literally talked about my Sanji theory again, which I believe in now more than ever thanks to your comments. I believe that Sanji is trans now more than ever. I really was cooking. We are cooking collectively. So if you want to cook with all of us, I would love to hear what you think in the comments. You can watch my videos to get a better understanding, a different perspective anyways of them as you go on your One Piece journey. While you're at it, look at the perspective of the Booktok girlies that I will link down in the description and that I featured in this video today. It was so fun to look at their videos. It's been a while since I've done a TikTok trend, so I always love doing stuff like this, so I would definitely check them out and continue to see how their One Piece journey evolves. I will definitely be especially looking at to see what Juliette says, and of course Morgan and Cheddars. I want to follow up and see what they think as they go through the arcs. But yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you so much, my $7, my $3, and my $1. And I would like to thank my YouTube members. All of you have been super loyal. I appreciate it, but I even like to thank all of you that are watching this video. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.